Howdy everyone, my name is Darren, also known as Servotoken, and I've got some more value vintage goodness for you. If you're new around here or have never heard of the format before, it's exactly what it sounds like. We are combining the vintage restricted list with a $30 budget cap in order to make our decks. It's the best way to play the game, and if you aren't in on the format already, you definitely should be. Today, we're covering the deck that I've had the most top finishes with in our events, the fishy friends themselves, Merfolk. A deck with some of the richest history in the game, Merfolk has been a competitive staple in every format that it's been legal in since the dawn of time, and Value Vintage is no exception. Merfolk is an aggressive creature-based tempo strategy that is looking to find its advantages via mana development. The deck is an example of classic tempo at its best, and focuses heavily on outpacing the opponent by getting more out of every mana it has access to at every point in the game. Understanding tempo is key to understanding how this deck operates, so let's do a quick rundown of that first. What is tempo? For those who may not have heard, tempo is the idea of utilizing time as a resource in the game and creating tangible impacts from a non-tangible idea. To take advantage of tempo in a game is to observe the limiting factors of the game's design and use those factors as choke points to stymie the opposing player's game plan development. In other words, you are finding the thing that the rules of the game tell you that you only get a certain amount of, and playing in such a way that that certain amount is not enough to put you into a winning position. In Magic, your two primary limiting factors are drawing one card at the start of your turn and playing one land per turn. There are other strategies that capitalize on the flow of cards as the game progresses, such as classic blue-white control decks, but for our purposes, we're going to be capitalizing on the game's standard mana development. You can see on this graph that by playing a land each turn, you can expect an exponential increase in mana output, assuming that you're using all of your mana every turn. The x-axis is which turn we're on, and the y-axis is the total cumulative amount of mana you will have access to at that point, assuming you've played a land each turn. Merfolk and tempo strategies like it are looking to disrupt that exponential flow of mana, setting the opponent's development back to such a degree that we can outpace them. We can see on the graph that on turn 1, you have one land, and thus access to one mana. On turn 2, you play a second land, and if you use both of them, those combine with your first mana on turn 1 for a total of 3 mana availability on turn 2. Turn 3 likewise sees your third land, granting an additional 3 mana to the total, bringing you to 6. This value compounds turn over turn as your expected mana total. What Merfolk and other tempo strategies want to do is negate the use of some of this mana, setting the exponential curve back again and again. See here how negating one turn's worth of play significantly reduces the amount of total mana available. When negating mana, you are basically making it as though the opponent hasn't used their mana at all that turn, because the board state is the same at the end of the turn as it was at the beginning. Say they spend 3 mana to cast a Grey Ogre. You can spend 0 mana to return that card to their hand, for example, using Aether Vial to put a Harbinger of the Seas into play. In this exchange, you are up 3 mana over the opponent, and their new mana availability chart looks like this. The point of these decks is to create a mana deficit between you and your opponent's mana availability chart, and use that space to take over the game, as these disruptions will greatly compound over time. Now, let's talk about the deck. At its core, there are really only 2 major roles that the cards in this deck can slot into: beaters and tempo plays, with the occasional bit of crossover as well. The beaters are the most straightforward. They're the cards included to create an increased damage output. Lord effects are the main way we make this happen, with cards such as Merfolk of the Pearl Trident and Merrow Reejerey buffing up the entire team. My list currently plays with 10 Lord effects, though there are definitely different builds out there that can facilitate more or less depending on your preference. Master of the Pearl Trident offers the deck an evasive means of moving around blockers with its Island Walk ability. This card can be crucial in the later turns of the game, as the deck isn't always capable of dealing with every card the opponent can throw down immediately. Making them ineligible as blockers effectively eliminates their usefulness, and the opponent shouldn't ever be short on islands to make that happen, but more on that later. Merrow Reejerey is the other must-include lord for the deck, providing that same +1/+1 benefit as well as the most useful effect in the strategy. The ability to tap down opposing blockers makes predicting combat next to impossible for the opponent, but this effect can also be used to untap your lands or Aether Vial to run out some additional support when you otherwise wouldn't have access. Svyelun of Sea and Sky is in the deck to offer a bit of protection from opposing interaction, as well as its ability to refill the hand and dig out of some unfavorable positions. Being a Swords to Plowshares format means that the indestructible ability isn't always the most relevant, but drawing extra cards can never be a bad thing. Speaking of, Silvergill Adept makes an appearance as well because it's effectively just a free body. It is always either the secondary option when choosing what to send through the vial, or the thing that you use your mana on your turn when the opponent isn't doing anything relevant. Any body is a good one in a deck full of Lord effects, so its meager 2/1 stat line isn't as much of an issue as it might seem. Lastly in the beaters section, we have Triton Shorestalker, a card that I've included for its ability to steal the initiative and monarch statuses. These used to be a much bigger part of the format, and recently players have started to slink away from them slightly, but being unblockable means that the opponent will be taking guaranteed damage each turn regardless. In a deck where we want to turn small numbers into big ones, that little bit of extra chip will definitely add up over time. For tempo plays, we're largely looking to get onto that mana deficit plan, and go about that in a variety of ways. Half of that plan is to turn the opponent's lands into islands, ideally making them an unusable source of what is effectively colorless mana. And then for the matchups where that isn't a viable strategy, we're looking to tax them on their mana use in a more traditional sense. In either case, it's all about creating that mana advantage by increasing our own and decreasing their mana availability over time. There's no better mana influencing card for a creature strategy than Aether Vial. This card effectively supplies you with an additional land drop every turn as far as available mana goes, increasing your turn 2 output to 4, your turn 3 output to 8, and on up the chain. This card also gives every creature in the deck flash, which is crucial to playing optimally, as you can always react to things that your opponent is doing instead of guessing what their next play will be. The power of Vial cannot be understated, and there's a reason that we're willing to commit half of our budget to this card. Spreading Seas and Tideshaper both fill the role of island creation for the deck, and as mentioned, can be seen making opposing lands useless. Many decks in the format either work with lands that have text on them, such as Dark Depths and Creature lands, or they have some serious color requirements that they need to fulfill, like 5-color humans. Turning those decks' lands into islands is nearly the same as destroying them outright, and, in the worst case, will provide some unblockability with Master of the Pearl Trident. When the island plan isn't at full power, we still have the means to tax the opponent's land base via Cursecatcher and Vodalian Hexcatcher. Each of these cards will put a strain on the opponent as they try to curve out, and they will constantly be thinking about the additional mana spent on each spell they play. These cards provide some strong stack interaction without sacrificing on the deck's overall creature count. In the sideboard, there are some packages that come in and out depending on the matchup. Being such a reactive deck that derives its strength from playing off of the opponent's game plan, Merfolk needs to be flexible with what it brings in and when. Typically, my main packages to sideboard out involve the Island Makers, Spreading Seas and Tideshaper, against decks where that plan isn't relevant, the taxing effects for larger mana decks or similar strategies where the additional cost might not impact the opponent's pace of play, or Silvergill Adepts and Triton Shorestalkers in matchups where we can't fully rely on the snowballing nature of Merfolk as a swarming force. To replace these packages, Blue has a wide variety of cards that can be utilized to make specific situations more manageable. A few of the key roles to be aware of when making a sideboard include Artifact Enchantment Hate, protection from interactive spells, ways to generate card advantage, targeted creature removal, Graveyard Hate, additional taxing effects, more stack interaction, and any hate piece against the myriad of unfair strategies that exist in the format. With how many options there are for ways to answer key problematic strategies, there isn't really a correct or absolute way to form the sideboard here, and you should always reflect on the meta that you anticipate going up against before committing any of your slots. In a large percentage of games, I find myself bringing in between 7 and 12 cards for a given matchup, which speaks well to the deck's flexibility on the whole. As some alternative options for deck building, you do have a few routes that you can go down. Most of them will involve cutting Aether Vial, however, so for you Merfolk purists out there, you can just skip to the deck list at the end of the video. Deeproot Pilgrimage is a relatively new addition to the Merfolk tool belt, and several players have found success with the card, sometimes even in combination with the card Opposition, which turns the deck into more of a prison-style strategy. Likewise, you can also include some vehicles like Smuggler's Copter or Subterranean Schooner to offer an effective way to tap down your team and create an explosion of Merfolk tokens. Tishana's Tidebinder, Rishadan Dockhand, and even Subtlety are great examples of cards that can further supplement your disruptive element and are great for combating more specific strategies. Seize Claim and Echoing Truth can also be included as additional copies of some of your better effects in the deck already. The deck is truly a reflection of you as a player and your ability to pre-plan going into an event. It's highly flexible and can be molded into any shape you need it to in order to get ahead. And here is my complete current deck list that I've used to take down some of our side events at our recent Nerd Rage Gaming Open Series appearances, and this is also available in the description of the video. This deck is ideal for someone who loves to analyze the metagame and has a firm grasp of the format's general strengths and weaknesses. It's not a deck for everyone, but for those who have loved the fish in other formats, you can expect a similar performance here. That's all for this one. Let me know down in the comments what you think about Merfolk, or how you would go about building the deck. If Value Vintage sounds interesting to you, or you just like a fresh new deck building experience, come check out our Discord, where you can hit up other like-minded people about Magic's best format. If you like this content and want to see more from us, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, as that really helps us out a lot. Also be sure to check out our sponsor TCGPlayer using the affiliate code on screen and in the description. Ordering your cards through there will give us a little kickback, which we will then fold back into making the format great. A lot of our current costs are in promotional materials such as stickers, posters, shirts, and playmats, so the money is absolutely going to a good cause. That's all I've got for now. Until next time, stay safe, play smart, and thanks for watching.